Some words can't be taken back. Some humiliations change everything. I thought my son's wedding would be the happiest day for our family. What I didn't expect was to be called a smelly sow by my new daughter Dash in Dash Law ... Right in front of all the wedding guests, at the fancy Adolphus Hotel in Dallas, surrounded by crystal and champagne. Here I was, a divorced mom who worked her whole life as a nurse, coming face to face with the elite crowd that never accepted me. When Sophia Hartwell decided to humiliate me publicly, I had to choose between causing a scene at my son's wedding or just swallowing the disrespect. But then the bride's father looked me straight in the eyes and recognized who I really was. My name is Patricia Williams, and I need to tell you about the most humiliating and ultimately vindicating day of my life. It happened 3 weeks ago at my son Daniel's wedding in Dallas. I should have known something was off when I got the invitation. The venue was the Adolphus Hotel downtown, one of those grand old places where oil money still flows like champagne. My son had been dating Sophia Hartwell for 2 years, and I'd met her exactly 3 times. Each meeting felt like a job interview. I was failing. Daniel picked me up that Saturday morning in his new BMW, a wedding gift from Sophia's family, he explained with that sheepish grin I remembered from his teenage years. Mom, just try to have fun today, okay? I always have fun at weddings, I said, smoothing my navy dress. I'd bought it at Nordstrom Rack specifically for this day. Spending more than I had in months, the valet at the Adolphus took one look at Daniel's car and smiled. Then he saw me getting out of the passenger seat, and his expression went neutral. Inside, crystal chandeliers caught the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. Women in designer dresses air-kissed while men in expensive suits discussed golf handicaps and stock portfolios. I felt like I was wearing a costume to someone else's play. Patricia, Sophia's mother, Linda Hartwell, glided over in a champagne-colored gown that probably costs more than my monthly rent. You look lovely. The pause before lovely could have filled a canyon. Thank you, Linda. The hotel is beautiful. Yes, well, we wanted something special for our little princess. She gestured toward Sophia, who was holding court near the bar in her designer pre-reception dress. You must be so excited to welcome her into your family. Before I could answer, she'd already turned to greet someone more important. That's when I heard it. I was standing near the cocktail station, trying to figure out if I should order wine or stick with water, when Sophia appeared beside me with 3 of her bridesmaids. They were all blonde, all wearing matching pearl necklaces, all speaking in that particular tone wealthy young women use when they think they're being clever. Can you believe Daniel's mother showed up in that? One of them whispered, not quite quietly enough. Sophia laughed, a tinkling sound like expensive wind chimes. There's the smelly sow we have to live with now, she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. God, I hope she doesn't embarrass us during dinner. The bridesmaids giggled. A few nearby guests turned to look, some covering their mouths to hide smiles. Heat flooded my face as conversations around us paused. People laughed until her father saw my face. I watched Robert Hartwell's expression change from amused tolerance to something like shock. He was standing across the room, martini halfway to his lips, staring at me with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. The laughter died in my throat as our eyes met. I wanted to disappear. Every instinct told me to grab my purse and walk straight out of that hotel, but Daniel was getting married in 30 minutes. This was his day, not mine. Sophia had already moved on, leading her bridesmaids toward the photographer like nothing had happened. But the damage was done. I could feel eyes on me, hear the whispered conversations that stopped when I looked in their direction. Mom? Daniel appeared at my elbow, his face flushed with confusion. What just happened? People are staring. Nothing, honey. Just wedding nerves. But he'd heard something. I could see it in his eyes, that terrible moment when your child realizes the world isn't as kind as you've tried to make it seem. Sophia didn't mean anything by it, he said quietly. She's just stressed. This whole thing has been Daniel. I touched his arm. You don't need to explain your wife's behavior to me. She's not my wife yet. She will be in 20 minutes. He opened his mouth to say something else, but Linda Hartwell swept over with a photographer in tow. "Family photos," she announced. "Daniel, we need you with Sophia and her grandparents. Patricia, perhaps you could. Wait here." I nodded and watched my son get pulled into a circle of people who would never consider me family. That's when Robert Hartwell walked over. He was a tall man, probably in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commands rooms. Up close, I could see laugh lines around his eyes and a small scar on his chin that somehow made his face more interesting. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice carefully polite. "I'm Robert Hartwell, Sophia's father, Patricia Williams." He studied my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Williams. Patricia Williams. You work in healthcare, don't you?" My chest tightened. "I'm a nurse." "Well, I was. I'm retired now." "Texas Presbyterian." "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper. His entire demeanor shifted. The polite stranger disappeared, replaced by something warmer and more complex. "Oh my God, you're that Patricia Williams." I didn't know what to say. Around us, the wedding reception continued, servers circulating with appetizers, the string quartet playing something soft and expensive, guests moving through the choreographed dance of social obligation. "I'm sorry," I managed. "Do we know each other?" Robert set his martini on a nearby table. 15 years ago, March 2010, you were working the cardiac unit at Presbyterian." My breath caught. March 2010, the month that changed everything. "My father," Robert continued, his voice dropping, "Harold Hartwell. He came in with chest pains on a Thursday night. You were his nurse." The memory hit me like cold water. Harold Hartwell Attai, 2 years old, scared, alone, because his family was stuck in traffic from some social event. I'd held his hand during the worst of it, talked him through the procedures, stayed past my shift to make sure he felt safe. "He had a massive heart attack," Robert said. "You called his code blue. You did CPR for 12 minutes until the team got there. I remember. He lived another 5 years because of you. 5 years to see his grandchildren grow up. To walk Sophia down the aisle at her first wedding gaud. That was a disaster to teach my son to play chess." The wedding reception continued round us, but it felt like we were standing in a bubble of sudden quiet. "He talked about you," Robert continued, "for years. That angel nurse who saved my life. He even tried to find you afterward, to thank you properly, but the hospital said they couldn't give out personal information." I felt lightheaded. "Mr. Hartwell, I was just doing my job." "No." His voice was firm. "You stayed with him when you didn't have to. You held his hand when he was scared. You treated him like he mattered when half the staff was ready to write him off as another elderly cardiac case." Behind him, I could see Sophia posing for photos, her laugh carrying across the room. The same laugh she'd used when calling me a smelly sow. "Patricia." Robert's voice was gentle now. "What did my daughter say to you?" The question hung in the air between us. I could lie, make some excuse, pretend it hadn't happened. Keep the peace for Daniel's sake, but I was tired of keeping peace at my own expense. "She called me a smelly sow," I said quietly. "She said she hoped I wouldn't embarrass everyone during dinner." Robert's face went through several expressions: surprise, anger, something that looked like shame. In front of people, her bridesmaids, a few guests. It was meant to be overheard. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, there was steel in his expression. "Excuse me," he said. "I need to have a conversation with my daughter." "Mr. Hartwell, Robert, please." "Don't. It's Daniel's wedding day, which is exactly why this needs to be addressed." Watched him walk across the room towards Sophia. She was still posing with her bridesmaids, radiant in her pre-ceremony glow. The photographer was directing them to laugh naturally, and their artificial giggles filled the air. "Sophia," Robert's voice cut through the chatter. "I need to speak with you. Privately. Daddy, we're doing photos now. Sophia." Something in his tone made her stop posing. She looked from her father to me, standing across the room. And I saw the moment she realized her mistake. The photographer lowered his camera. The bridesmaids exchanged glances. Linda Hartwell materialized from somewhere, her social radar detecting trouble. "Robert, what's wrong?" Linda's voice had that edge women get when they sense their carefully planned events going off script. "We need to discuss appropriate behavior toward family members," Robert said. Loud enough for nearby guests to hear, the word family hit the room like a small explosion. Sophia's face went pale. Under her professional makeup, "Daddy, I don't know what you're talking about." "Patricia Williams saved your grandfather's life," Robert said clearly. "She's the nurse who kept Harold alive long enough for the cardiac team to restart his heart. She stayed with him, held his hand, treated him with dignity when he was scared and alone." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Her bridesmaids suddenly found their phones fascinating. Linda Hartwell looked like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. "And 15 minutes ago," Robert continued, "you called her a smelly sow in front of half our guests." The photographer cleared his throat. "Should I come back later?" "That might be best," Robert said, without taking his eyes off his daughter. I wanted to disappear into the marble floor of the Adolphus Hotel. This wasn't how weddings were supposed to go. This wasn't how I'd imagined my son's special day. Daniel appeared beside me, his face pale. "Mom, what's happening?" "Your bride just learned some family history," I said quietly. Across the room, Sophia was crying. Not the pretty tears of a bride overwhelmed by joy, but the ugly tears of someone whose world had just shifted beneath her feet. Linda Hartwell was trying to comfort her while simultaneously shooting daggers at me with her eyes. "This is not how we handle family disagreements," Linda hissed at Robert. "This is exactly how we handled disrespect toward someone who saved my father's life," Robert shot back. The wedding coordinator appeared from nowhere, her smile professional but strained. "Perhaps we should move to the ceremony space. We're running a few minutes behind schedule, but the damage was done." Guests were whispering, phones were probably recording, and the fairy tale wedding was rapidly becoming a family drama. Sophia walked over to me, her steps careful in her designer heels. Up close, I could see her mascara starting to smudge despite its waterproof promises. "Mrs. Williams," she said, her voice small. "I didn't know." "About Grandpa Harold. Daddy never told me the nurse's name." I looked at this young woman, 26 years old, beautiful, privileged, and suddenly very human. "That doesn't excuse what you said, Sophia. I know." She glanced around at the watching faces. "I was showing off for my friends. It was cruel and stupid." Daniel stepped forward. "Sophia, you called my mother a what?" The room held its breath. I could practically hear smartphones being raised to record whatever happened next. "I said something terrible," Sophia whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You called her a smelly sow." Daniel's voice was rising. "At our wedding, in front of people. Daniel, please, no." He turned to face the gathered guests, many of whom were pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. "Everyone needs to understand something. My mother worked double shifts for 20 years to put me through college. She drove a 15-year-old Honda until last month because she was saving money for my wedding gift. She bought her dress at Nordstrom Rack and spent an hour doing her own hair because she wanted to look nice for your family." His voice cracked slightly. "And she's the kindest, most generous person I know. If you can't see that, if you can't treat her with basic respect, then maybe we need to reconsider what we're doing here." The silence was thunderous. Linda Hartwell stepped forward, her social instincts finally kicking in. "Of course we respect Patricia. This is just a misunderstanding between young people. Wedding stress. You know how it is. I don't think it's a misunderstanding, Robert said firmly. I think it's a character issue. Sophia was crying harder now. Daddy, please. Daniel, I'm sorry. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll make this right. The wedding coordinator checked her watch nervously. We really do need to move to the ceremony space. The minister is waiting, and we have the ballroom reserved for photos afterward. I looked at my son, my brilliant, kind son, who deserved better than this drama on his wedding day. Then I looked at Sophia, young and overwhelmed and genuinely sorry. Daniel, I said quietly, this is your decision. It's your wedding, your life, your choice. He stared at me for a long moment. What would you do, Mom? I'd remember that people can learn from their mistakes. But I'd also remember that respect isn't negotiable. The ceremony happened. Not the fairy tale wedding Sophia had probably dreamed of since childhood, but something smaller and more real. Half the guests were still buzzing with the drama from the cocktail hour, and the other half were pretending nothing had happened. I sat in the front row, watching my son marry a woman who'd called me a smelly sow an hour earlier. It should have been the worst moment of my life. Instead, it felt oddly liberating. Robert Hartwell had moved heaven and earth to seat me at the family table for dinner. Linda had protested something about place cards and careful planning, but he'd overruled her with the quiet authority of someone who'd clearly been making family decisions for decades. You're sitting with us, he'd said simply. Your family now. The reception dinner was awkward in the way only family gatherings can be. Sophia kept glancing at me with red-rimmed eyes, clearly wanting to say something but not knowing how. Daniel was trying to play the happy groom while watching me for signs that I was okay. I wasn't okay, exactly. But I was something better than okay. I was done apologizing for taking up space. Patricia, Robert said during the salad course, tell me about your retirement. Are you enjoying it? It was a lifeline normal conversation in an abnormal situation. I'm volunteering at a free clinic in Oak Cliff, just a few days a week. Oak Cliff. Linda looked up from her barely touched salad. Isn't that area rather rough? It's underserved, I corrected. Lots of working families who can't afford regular health care. Mom's always been like that, Daniel said, his voice warming. She used to drag me to the food bank every Thanksgiving to help serve meals. Still do, I said, though now I go alone. Sophia finally spoke up. That's really nice. The volunteer work. I mean, it wasn't much, but it was a start. The evening progressed in fits and starts. During father-daughter dance, Robert whispered something in Sophia's ear that made her nod seriously. During the mother-son dance, Daniel apologized for the 10th time. Stop, I told him as we swayed to some generic romantic song. You married her, not her worst moment, but what she said was cruel and thoughtless. But she's 26, Daniel. When you were 26, you dated that girl who told me I had interesting taste in furniture. He winced. Jessica. God, she was awful. People grow up. The question is whether Sophia wants to kick later. As the evening wound down and guests started calling Ubers, Sophia found me by the coat check. Mrs. Williams. Her voice was tentative. Could we talk? Just for a minute. We found a quiet corner near the hotel's main staircase. The sounds of the reception laughter, clinking glasses, the DJ playing something with too much bass felt distant here. I need you to know, Sophia said, that what I said earlier wasn't about you personally. I mean, it was awful and wrong, but it wasn't because I know you or dislike you specifically. I waited. It was because I was scared, she continued. My friends, my family, we all exist in this bubble where everyone has money and the right connections and the same background. Daniel is the first person I've ever dated who didn't come from that world, and that scares you. It terrifies me. Her voice was small. Because what if I'm not good enough for him? What if I can't make him happy? What if his family thinks I'm just some spoiled rich girl? Despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy. So you decided to make me the problem instead. I guess I thought if I could make you seem ... lesser, then I'd feel more secure." She wiped her eyes with a cocktail napkin. "It was horrible and stupid. Yes, it was." She flinched at my directness, but didn't argue. "Sophia," I said carefully, "I don't need you to like me, but I need you to respect me. And I need you to understand that if you want to be part of Daniel's life, you're part of mine too. Because this isn't about one bad moment at a wedding. This is about how you see people who are different from you, how you treat people who don't have what you have." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing what I'd said. Around us, the Adolphus Hotel continued its elegant nighttime routine, guests checking in, valets organizing cars, the soft murmur of money and privilege conducting business. "My grandfather," she said finally. "Daddy told me more about what happened, about how you stayed with him. I told you, I was just doing my job." "No." She shook her head. "I asked one of my friends who's a nurse. She said most people would have stabilized him and moved on to the next patient. You stayed because you cared." I didn't know what to say to that. "I want to learn," Sophia continued, "how to be better, how to see people the way you do. It's not about seeing people differently," I said. "It's about seeing them at all." She nodded like she was taking notes. Could we maybe have coffee sometime? After Daniel and I get back from our honeymoon, I'd like to hear more about Grandpa Harold. And about your work. It wasn't everything. It wasn't a magic fix for what had happened earlier. But it was something. "I'd like that," I said. The wedding coordinator appeared, looking frazzled. "Mrs. Hartwell, we need to start wrapping up. The hotel needs to reset the ballroom for a corporate event tomorrow morning." Sophia glanced around at the remaining guests. "Of course. Let me find Daniel." As she walked away, Robert approached. "How are you holding up?" "Tired," I admitted. "It's been quite a day." "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have prepared Sophia better. Should have told her about her grandfather and what you did for our family. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I didn't think she was ready to hear it. Sophia's grown up with every advantage, every comfort. The idea that our family's wealth and status might not be the most important things in a room, it's a hard lesson. And now she's married to your son. She doesn't get to live in that bubble anymore." We watched as Daniel and Sophia said goodbye to the last of their guests. They looked exhausted, but happy, or at least relieved, that the day was over. "Thank you," Robert said suddenly. "For what?" "For handling this with grace. You could have caused a scene, could have walked out, could have made this so much worse for everyone, including my son. Especially your son." He paused. "But also for us. Sophia needed to learn this lesson, and she needed to learn it from someone who mattered." Daniel appeared at my elbow. "Mom, are you ready to go? I can drive you home before Sophia and I head to the hotel." "Actually," Sophia said, joining us, "we were hoping you might want to join us for breakfast tomorrow. Before we leave for our honeymoon." I looked at this young woman who'd humiliated me a few hours earlier and was now tentatively offering an olive branch. "I'd like that," I said. The valet brought Daniel's BMW around. As we waited, Robert pulled me aside one more time. "Patricia," he said quietly, "I meant what I said earlier. You're family now, and in this family, we take care of each other. Even the Smelly Sows." I asked with a small smile. He winced. "Especially them." The breakfast meeting never happened. At 6 a.m. the next morning, my phone rang. It was Daniel, calling from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Sophia's been throwing up all night. Food poisoning, we think. We're trying to catch an earlier flight to get to the resort before she gets worse." "Oh, honey, is she okay?" "She will be. But Mom, we need to talk when I get back. About yesterday. About everything. Daniel, you're on your honeymoon. Don't worry about I am worried. What Sophia said was unforgivable. I could hear airport announcements in the background, the controlled chaos of early morning travel. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. "Stop defending her," Daniel said, his voice sharp. "I know you, Mom. I know you're trying to keep the peace for my sake." But she crossed a line. He was right. I was trying to keep the peace. It's what I'd done my whole life: smooth over conflicts, make excuses for other people's bad behavior, shrink myself to make room for everyone else's comfort. "We'll talk when you get back," I said finally. "We will. And Mom, I love you. I'm proud of you for how you handled yesterday." "I love you too, sweetheart. Have a good trip." After I hung up, I made coffee and sat on my small patio, watching Dallas wake up. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Mrs. Williams. This is Sophia. Daniel gave me your number. I wanted to thank you again for last night and apologize once more for my behavior. I hope we can still have that coffee when we get back." "Sophia," I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you for reaching out. Feel better and enjoy your honeymoon. We'll talk when you're ready." Patricia, it wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was honest. Over the next week, word of the wedding incident spread through both families like wildfire. My sister called from Austin, having heard some version of events from Daniel's cousin. "Patricia, please tell me you didn't let that girl walk all over you." "I handled it." "Karen, how?" "Because if some little princess had called me a smelly sow at her own wedding, I would have made sure everyone in that hotel knew exactly what kind of person she really is. And that would have helped Daniel how?" Karen was quiet for a moment. "You're right. But honey, you don't have to take abuse just to keep everyone else happy." "I didn't take it. I let her father handle it." "Robert Hartwell, right. The one whose daddy you saved?" "That's the one." "Karma," Karen said with satisfaction. "Sometimes the universe actually gets it right." 3 days later, Linda Hartwell called. I almost didn't answer. The name on my caller ID made my stomach clench, but curiosity won. "Patricia," she said without preamble, "I need to speak with you." "About what, Linda?" "About what happened at the wedding. About Sophia's behavior." She paused. "And about my own." I waited. "I owe you an apology," she continued. "I was so focused on making sure everything was perfect for Sophia that I forgot basic decency. I should have intervened when she made that comment. I should have welcomed you properly from the beginning. Why didn't you?" Another pause. "Honestly, because I was being a snob. You're a nurse. You live in a modest apartment. You drive an older car. I made assumptions about what kind of person you were based on what you had instead of who you were. It was more honesty than I'd expected from Linda Hartwell. And now?" I asked. "Now I know you saved my father-in-law's life. Now I know you raised a son who loves my daughter enough to stand up to her when she's wrong. Now I know you handled an impossible situation with more grace than most people could manage." "Linda, let me finish," she said. "I want to make this right. Both families are going to be connected for a long time now. We need to find a way to move forward." "What did you have in mind?" "Dinner at our house. Just the 4 of us. You, me, Robert, and whoever you'd like to bring. A chance to start over." I thought about it. "What does Sophia think about this?" "Sophia doesn't know. This isn't about her. This is about me recognizing that I was wrong and wanting to do better." Daniel and Sophia came back from their honeymoon 2 weeks later, both tanned and relaxed. They invited me to dinner at their new apartment in uptown Dallas. Wedding gift from the Hartwells that probably cost more than I'd made in 2 years of nursing. "Mom," Daniel said as we sat around their dining room table, "Sophia has something she wants to say." Sophia looked nervous but determined. Mrs. Williams, Patricia, I spent a lot of time thinking during our trip about what happened at the wedding, about what kind of person I want to be, about what kind of wife I want to be to Daniel. She took a shaky breath. "I grew up believing that having money and the right connections made me better than other people. I know that's awful, But it's true. And when I met you, someone who clearly didn't come from that world, but who Daniel loved so much, it threatened everything I thought I knew about how the world works. So you decided to put me in my place, I said. Yes. Her voice was small, and I was wrong. Not just about you, but about everything. Daniel told me about your volunteer work, about how you raised him as a single mother, about all the sacrifices you made. You're not lesser than me, you're better than me in every way that actually matters. I looked at this young woman, still privileged, still sheltered, but genuinely trying to grow. Sophia, I don't need you to think I'm better than you. I just need you to treat me like an equal. I know, and I will. But I also want to learn from you about how to see people for who they really are instead of what they have, about how to be generous with my time and energy instead of just my money. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We both want that, Mom. We want you to teach us. Teach you what? How to be good people, Sophia said simply. How to use what we have to help others instead of just making ourselves feel superior. It wasn't the conversation I'd expected to have, but then again, nothing about this whole experience had gone the way I'd expected. There's something else, Daniel said. We've been talking to Sophia's parents about setting up a scholarship fund at UT Southwestern for nursing students who are working their way through school. We want to call it the Harold Hartwell Memorial Scholarship, Sophia added, after my grandfather. But we want you to help us design the criteria. We want to make sure it goes to students who really need it, not just the ones with the best grades or the right connections. I felt tears prick my eyes. That's a beautiful way to honor his memory. Will you help us? Daniel asked. Of course. Over the next hour, we talked about the scholarship, about their honeymoon, about everything except the elephant in the room, the fact that Sophia had publicly humiliated me at her own wedding. Finally, as I was getting ready to leave, Sophia walked me to the door. Patricia, she said quietly, I know I can't take back what I said. I know sorry isn't enough. But I promise you it will never happen again. Not to you, not to anyone. People will test that promise, I warned her. There will be situations where it's easier to be cruel than kind, where putting someone else down seems like it might lift you up. I know, but I have something I didn't have before. What's that? I have you watching, and I have the memory of how terrible I felt when I saw the hurt in your eyes. I never want to feel that way again. It wasn't a perfect ending. There was still work to be done, trust to be rebuilt, relationships to be navigated. But it was a beginning. 3 months later, Linda Hartwell and I had our dinner. Just the two of us at a small restaurant in Deep Ellum that neither of us had been to before neutral territory. We talked for 3 hours about our children, our fears, our hopes for their marriage. I'm still learning, she admitted over dessert. How to be a better person, how to see past my own privilege. It's harder than I thought it would be. Most worthwhile things are, I said. The Harold Hartwell Memorial Scholarship launched that spring. Sophia threw herself into the project with the same intensity she'd once reserved for charity galas and social events. She interviewed applicants personally, visited the free clinic where I volunteered, even signed up for a shift serving meals at the food bank. I want to understand, she told me one day as we sorted donations. I want to see the world the way you do. It's not about seeing the world differently, I reminded her. It's about seeing it clearly. Daniel and Sophia's first anniversary is next month. They're having a small party family only, Sophia specified. No drama, no social posturing, just the people who matter most. Will you make a toast? Sophia asked me last week, something about second chances and growing up. I'll think about it, I said, because that's what this whole experience taught me, that people can change, that families can heal, that sometimes the worst moments can become the catalysts for the best growth. My name is Patricia Williams. I'm a retired nurse, a proud mother, and now a somewhat surprised mother-in-law. And I'm still learning that respect isn't something you earn through wealth or status or even good deeds. Respect is something you give to others because they're human, beings worthy of dignity, even when they forget to give it back, even when they call you names at their own wedding, even when they're young and scared and making terrible mistakes, because sometimes, if you're patient enough and strong enough and lucky enough, they remember how to be human too, and that's worth more than any apology.